World War I, or the First World War, the 28th of July 1914 to the 11th of November 1918, was a global conflict fought between two coalitions, the Allies and the Central Powers. Fighting took place throughout Europe, the Middle East, Africa, the Pacific, and parts of Asia. One of the deadliest wars in history, it resulted in an estimated 9 million soldiers dead and 23 million wounded, plus another 5 million civilian deaths from various causes. Millions more died as a result of genocide, and the war was a major factor in the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Increasing diplomatic tension between the European great powers reached a breaking point on the 28th of June 1914, when a Bosnian Serb named Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Austria-Hungary held Serbia responsible, and declared war on the 28th of July. Russia came to Serbia's defense, and by the 4th of August, Germany, France, and Britain were drawn into the war, with the Ottoman Empire joining in November of that same year. Germany's strategy in 1914 was to first defeat France, then transfer forces to the Russian front. However, this failed, and by the end of 1914, the Western Front consisted of a continuous line of trenches stretching from the English Channel to Switzerland. The Eastern Front was more dynamic, but neither side could gain a decisive advantage, despite costly offensives. As the war expanded to more fronts, Bulgaria, Italy, Romania, Greece and others joined in from 1915 onward. In early 1917, the United States entered the war on the side of the Allies, and later the same year, the Bolsheviks seized power in the Russian October Revolution, making peace with the Central Powers in early 1918. Germany launched an offensive in the West in March 1918, and despite initial success, it left the German army exhausted and demoralized. A successful Allied counter-offensive later that year caused a collapse of the German front line. By the end of 1918, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary agreed to armistices with the Allies, leaving Germany isolated. Facing revolution at home and with his army on the verge of mutiny, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated on the 9th of November. Fighting ended with the armistice of the 11th of November 1918, while the subsequent Paris Peace Conference imposed various settlements on the defeated powers, notably the Treaty of Versailles. The dissolution of the Russian, German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires resulted in the creation of new independent states, including Poland, Finland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. The inability to manage post-war instability contributed to the outbreak of World War II in September 1939.
Names.
The term World War was first coined in September 1914 by German biologist and philosopher Ernst Haeckel. He claimed that, "There is no doubt that the course and character of the feared European war will become the First World War in the full sense of the word." 1. In the Indianapolis Star on the 20th of September 1914. The term First World War had been used by L.T. Call. Charles A. Court Repington, as a title for his 1920 memoirs. He had noted his discussion on the matter with a Major Johnston of Harvard University in his diary entry of the 10th of September 1918. Prior to World War II, the events of 1914 to 1918 were generally known as the Great War or simply the World War. In August 1914, the magazine The Independent wrote, "This is the Great War." It names itself. In October 1914, the Canadian magazine Maclean's similarly wrote, "Some wars name themselves. This is the Great War." 6. Contemporary Europeans also referred to it as the war to end war, and it was also described as the war to end all wars, due to their perception of its unparalleled scale, devastation, and loss of life.
Background.
Main article. Causes of World War I. Political and military alliances. Map of Europe focusing on Austria-Hungary and marking the central location of ethnic groups in it including Slovaks, Czechs, Slovenes, Croats, Serbs, Romanians, Ukrainians, Poles. Rival military coalitions in 1914. Triple Entente, Triple Alliance. For much of the 19th century, the major European powers maintained a tenuous balance of power, known as the Concert of Europe. 8. After 1848, this was challenged by Britain's withdrawal into so-called splendid isolation, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, new imperialism, and the rise of Prussia under Otto von Bismarck. The 1866 Austro-Prussian War established Prussian hegemony in German states, while victory in the 1870–1871 Franco-Prussian War allowed Bismarck to consolidate a German empire under Prussian leadership. Avenging the defeat of 1871, or revanchism, and recovering the provinces of Alsace-Lorraine became an obsession of French policy and public opinion for the next few years. Yet since the 1880s this concern had been eclipsed by the conquest of a vast colonial empire, and had disappeared from the programs of all French political parties as utterly unrealistic. To isolate France and avoid a war on two fronts, Bismarck negotiated the League of the Three Emperors between Austria-Hungary, Russia and Germany. After Russian victory in the 1877–1878 Russo-Turkish War, the League was dissolved due to Austrian concerns over Russian influence in the Balkans, an area they considered of vital strategic interest. Germany and Austria-Hungary then formed the 1879 Dual Alliance, which became the Triple Alliance when Italy joined in 1882. For Bismarck, the purpose of these agreements was to isolate France by ensuring the three empires resolved any disputes between themselves. When this was threatened in 1880 by British and French attempts to negotiate directly with Russia, he reformed the League in 1881, which was renewed in 1883 and 1885. After the agreement lapsed in 1887, he replaced it with the Reinsurance Treaty, a secret agreement between Germany and Russia to remain neutral if either were attacked by France or Austria-Hungary. Bismarck viewed peace with Russia as the foundation of German foreign policy, but after becoming Kaiser in 1890, Wilhelm II forced him to retire and was persuaded not to renew the Reinsurance Treaty by his new chancellor, Leo von Caprivi. This provided France an opportunity to counteract the Triple Alliance by signing the Franco-Russian Alliance in 1894, followed by the 1904 Entente Cordiale with Britain. The Triple Entente was completed by the 1907 Anglo-Russian Convention. While these were not formal alliances, by settling long-standing colonial disputes in Asia and Africa, the notion of British entry into any future conflict involving France or Russia became a possibility. 14. British and Russian support for France against Germany during the Agadir crisis in 1911 reinforced their relationship and increased Anglo-German estrangement. Arms race. SMS Rhineland, a Nassau-class battleship, Germany's first response to the British dreadnought. German industrial strength and production significantly increased after 1871, driven by the creation of a unified Reich, French indemnity payments, and the annexation of Alsace-Lorraine. Backed by Wilhelm II, Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz sought to use this growth in economic power to build a Kaiserliche Marine, or Imperial German Navy, which could compete with the British Royal Navy for naval supremacy. His thinking was influenced by U.S. naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan, who argued possession of a blue water navy was vital for global power projection. Tirpitz had his books translated into German, while Wilhelm made them required reading for his advisors and senior military personnel. However, it was also an emotional decision, driven by Wilhelm's simultaneous admiration for the Royal Navy and desire to surpass it. Bismarck thought that the British would not interfere in Europe, so long as its maritime supremacy remained secure, but his dismissal in 1890 led to a change in policy and an Anglo-German naval arms race began. 18. Despite the vast sums spent by Tirpitz, the launch of HMS Dreadnought in 1906 gave the British a technological advantage over their German rivals. Ultimately, the race diverted huge resources into creating a German navy large enough to antagonize Britain, but not defeat it. In 1911, Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg acknowledged defeat, leading to the Rüstungswende, or armaments turning point, when he switched expenditure from the navy to the army. This decision was not driven by a reduction in political tensions, but German concern over Russia's quick recovery from its defeat in the Russo-Japanese War and subsequent 1905 Russian Revolution that same year. Economic reforms backed by funding from the French led to a significant post-1908 expansion of railways and transportation infrastructure, particularly in its western border regions. Since Germany and Austria-Hungary relied on faster mobilization to compensate for their numerical inferiority compared to Russia, the threat posed by the closing of this gap was more important than competing with the Royal Navy. After Germany expanded its standing army by 170,000 troops in 1913, France extended compulsory military service from 2 to 3 years. Similar measures were taken by the Balkan powers and Italy, which led to increased expenditure by the Ottomans and Austria-Hungary. Absolute figures are hard to calculate due to differences in categorizing expenditure, since they often omit civilian infrastructure projects like railways, which also had logistical importance and military use. It is known, however, that from 1908 to 1913, military spending by the 6 major European powers increased by over 50% in real terms. Conflicts in the Balkans. Photo of large white building with one sign saying, Moritz Schiller, and another in Arabic. In front is a cluster of people looking at poster on the wall. Sarajevo citizens reading a poster with the proclamation of the Austrian annexation in 1908. The years before 1914 were marked by a series of crises in the Balkans as other powers sought to benefit from Ottoman decline. While Pan-Slavic and Orthodox Russia considered itself the protector of Serbia and other Slav states, they preferred the strategically vital Bosporus Straits to be controlled by a weak Ottoman government, rather than an ambitious Slav power like Bulgaria. Since Russia had its own ambitions in northeastern Anatolia and their clients had overlapping claims in the Balkans, balancing these divided Russian policymakers and added to regional instability. Austrian statesmen viewed the Balkans as essential for the continued existence of their empire, and saw Serbian expansion as a direct threat. The 1908–1909 Bosnian crisis began when Austria annexed the former Ottoman territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which it had occupied since 1878. Timed to coincide with the Bulgarian declaration of independence from the Ottoman Empire, this unilateral action was denounced by the European powers, but accepted as there was no consensus on how to resolve the situation. Some historians see this as a significant escalation, ending any chance of Austria cooperating with Russia in the Balkans while also damaging diplomatic relations between Serbia and Italy, both of whom had their own expansionist ambitions in the region. Tensions increased after the 1911–1912 Italo-Turkish War demonstrated Ottoman weakness and led to the formation of the Balkan League, an alliance of Serbia, Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Greece. The League quickly overran most of the Ottomans' territory in the Balkans during the 1912–1913 First Balkan War, much to the surprise of outside observers. 25. The Serbian capture of ports on the Adriatic resulted in partial Austrian mobilization starting on the 21st of November 1912, including units along the Russian border in Galicia. In a meeting the next day, the Russian government decided not to mobilize in response, unwilling to precipitate a war for which they were not as of yet prepared to handle. The great powers sought to reassert control through the 1913 Treaty of London, which created an independent Albania, while enlarging the territories of Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro and Greece. However, disputes between the victors sparked the 33-day Second Balkan War, when Bulgaria attacked Serbia and Greece on 16 June 1913. It was defeated, losing most of Macedonia to Serbia and Greece, and southern Dobruja to Romania. The result was that even countries which benefited from the Balkan Wars, such as Serbia and Greece, felt cheated of their rightful gains, while for Austria it demonstrated the apparent indifference with which other powers viewed their concerns, including Germany. This complex mix of resentment, nationalism and insecurity helps explain why the pre-1914 Balkans became known as the powder keg of Europe. Traditionally thought to show the arrest of Gavrilo Princip, by historians to depict an innocent bystander, Ferdinand Baer. In the summer of 1914, the sovereigns of Europe were woven together by treaties, alliances, as well as secret agreements. The Triple Alliance, 1882, encompassed the German Empire, Austria, and Italy. On 28 June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, heir presumptive to Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria, visited Sarajevo, capital of the recently annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. Cvijetko Popović, Gavrilo Princip, Nedeljko Kabrinović, Trifko Grabas, and Vaso Kubrilović, Bosnian Serbs, and Mohamed Mehmed Basic, from the Bosniaks community, 33, from the movement known as Young Bosnia, took up positions along the route taken by the Archduke's motorcade, with the intention of assassinating him. Supplied with arms by extremists within the Serbian Black Hand intelligence organization, they hoped his death would free Bosnia from Austrian rule, although there was little agreement on what would replace it. Nedeljko Kabrinovic threw a grenade at the Archduke's car and injured 2 of his aides, who were taken to hospital while the convoy carried on. The other assassins were also unsuccessful, but an hour later, as Ferdinand was returning from visiting the injured officers, his car took a wrong turn into a street where Gavrilo Princip was standing. He fired 2 pistol shots, fatally wounding Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. Although Emperor Franz Joseph was shocked by the incident, political and personal differences meant the 2 men were not close. Allegedly, his first reported comment was, "A higher power has re-established the order which I, alas, could not preserve." According to historian Zbigniew Zeman, in Vienna, the event almost failed to make any impression whatsoever. On 28 and 29 June, the crowds listened to music and drank wine, as if nothing had happened. Nevertheless, the impact of the murder of the heir to the throne was significant, and has been described by historian Christopher Clark as a 9/11 effect, a terrorist event charged with historic meaning, transforming the political chemistry in Vienna. Expansion of violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Crowds on the streets in the aftermath of the anti-Serb riots in Sarajevo, the 29th of June 1914. Austro-Hungarian authorities encouraged the subsequent anti-Serb riots in Sarajevo, in which Bosnian Croats and Bosniaks killed 2 Bosnian Serbs and damaged numerous Serb-owned buildings. 39-40 violent actions against ethnic Serbs were also organized outside Sarajevo, in other cities in Austro-Hungarian controlled Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia and Slovenia. Austro-Hungarian authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina imprisoned and extradited approximately 5,500 prominent Serbs, 700 to 2,200 of whom died in prison. A further 460 Serbs were sentenced to death. A predominantly Bosniak special militia known as the Schutzkorps was established and carried out the persecution of Serbs. July Crisis. Main articles: July Crisis, German entry into World War I, Austro-Hungarian entry into World War I, and Russian entry into World War I. Cheering crowds in London and Paris on the day war was declared. The assassination initiated the July Crisis, a month of diplomatic maneuvering between Austria-Hungary, Germany, Russia, France and Britain. Believing Serbian intelligence helped organize Franz Ferdinand's murder, Austrian officials wanted to use the opportunity to end their interference in Bosnia and saw war as the best way of achieving this. 45. However, the Foreign Ministry had no solid proof of Serbian involvement, and a dossier used to make its case contained multiple errors. On the 23rd of July, Austria delivered an ultimatum to Serbia, listing 10 demands made intentionally unacceptable to provide an excuse for starting hostilities. Ethno-linguistic map of Austria-Hungary, 1910. Bosnia-Herzegovina was annexed in 1908. Serbia ordered general mobilization on the 25th of July, but accepted all the terms, except for those empowering Austrian representatives to suppress subversive elements inside Serbia, and take part in the investigation and trial of Serbians linked to the assassination. Claiming this amounted to rejection, Austria broke off diplomatic relations and ordered partial mobilization the next day. On the 28th of July, they declared war on Serbia and began shelling Belgrade. Having initiated war preparations on the 25th of July, Russia now ordered general mobilization in support of Serbia on 30th. Anxious to ensure backing from the SPD political opposition by presenting Russia as the aggressor, German Chancellor Bethmann Hollweg delayed commencement of war preparations until the 31st of July. That afternoon the Russian government were handed a note requiring them to cease all war measures against Germany and Austria-Hungary within 12 hours. 52. A further German demand for neutrality was refused by the French, who ordered general mobilization but delayed declaring war. 53. The German General Staff had long assumed they faced a war on two fronts. The Schlieffen Plan envisaged using 80% of the army to defeat France, then switched to Russia. Since this required them to move quickly, mobilization orders were issued that afternoon. At a meeting on the 29th of July, the British cabinet had narrowly decided its obligations to Belgium under the 1839 Treaty of London did not require it to oppose a German invasion with military force. However, this was largely driven by Prime Minister Asquith's desire to maintain unity. He and his senior cabinet ministers were already committed to support France. The Royal Navy had been mobilized and public opinion was strongly in favor of intervention. 55. On the 31st of July, Britain sent notes to Germany and France, asking them to respect Belgian neutrality. France pledged to do so. Germany did not reply. Once the German ultimatum to Russia expired on the morning of the 1st of August, the two countries were at war. Later the same day, Wilhelm was informed by his ambassador in London, Prince Lichnowsky, that Britain would remain neutral if France was not attacked, and might not intervene at all given the ongoing Home Rule crisis in Ireland. Jubilant at this news, he ordered General Moltke, the German chief of staff, to march the whole of the army to the east. This allegedly brought Moltke to the verge of a nervous breakdown, before Lichnowsky realized he was mistaken. Once Wilhelm received a telegram from George V, it confirmed there had been a misunderstanding, and he told Moltke, "Now do what you want." Aware of German plans to attack through Belgium, French Commander-in-Chief Joseph Joffre asked his government for permission to cross the border and preempt such a move. To avoid a violation of Belgian neutrality, he was told any advance could come only after a German invasion. 59. Instead, the French cabinet ordered its army to withdraw 10 kilometers behind the German frontier, in order to avoid any incident which might provoke the war. On the 2nd of August, Germany occupied Luxembourg and exchanged fire with French units when German patrols entered French territory. On the 3rd of August, they declared war on France and demanded free passage across Belgium, which was refused. Early on the morning of the 4th of August, the Germans invaded and Albert I of Belgium called for assistance under the Treaty of London. Britain sent Germany an ultimatum demanding they withdraw from Belgium. When this expired at midnight without a response, the two empires were at war.